Hello, welcome back to Real Success. I'm here with Coach Brian Ferentz, the offensive coordinator with the Iowa football team here at the Hawkeye Football Complex. Brian, thanks a lot for taking the time. We're going to talk today about practice, preparation, and the perpetual pursuit of improvement. And the thing about football is, even compared to other sports, you know, here in college you play 10, 11, 12 games, NFL 16, high school even less, but a vast majority of your time as a coach and the time that the players have is in preparation, getting ready to play the games. You're only on the field for 3 hours a week, but you're in this building and outside the building preparing to play that game the entire week leading up to it. So, coaches like yourselves almost become masters of the art and the science behind how to prepare and do things right. So I'd like to chat a little bit about that today for the most part. How would you define or describe sort of the overall approach that the Hawkeye football team takes to practice and preparing the athletes to play the game?
Sure, well, you hit on it. You know, you're playing 12 games a year scheduled, and you're dealing with 12 months to play those 12 games. So those 12 games happen in about a 4-month span. Mm-hmm. So when you really look at it, 8 months of the year, we're really not even preparing to play an opponent. So when you look at the season and you look at the year, we try to take a 12-month approach. And I know that those guys in wrestling do the same thing. I'm always intrigued by how they do things. I think they're very similar in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
So we look at it from a 12-month standpoint. Certainly you have the in-season phase, which everybody sees. But once you're done with that, usually in January, you're moving right into that out-of-season phase. So we start with a winter program, and our winter program essentially consists just of strength and conditioning. Mm-hmm. Very minimal football. Mostly those guys are going to be in the weight room and on the field and doing things with Coach Doyle and his staff to develop a good base, increase their strength levels, and really just essentially all we're trying to do is create more ability to push against the ground. That's really what football is about.
Sure.
Then we move into the spring phase, where we're going to be practicing and actually building football skills and building a football team. And it's very simple. When we're in any football involved phase, we're talking about basically having a couple goals. One would be mastery of the fundamentals. Two would be mastery of the system. And three, probably most importantly, would be creating that team chemistry
culture
and that culture of football, just the football specific part. And we can come back to culture later. We go through spring ball, 15 practices, move out of spring ball into what we call the peak speed phase, which is about 2 weeks at the end of the spring. And it's essentially just with Coach Doyle in the weight room, where guys are really going to be running the fastest times they'll run all year. That's all we're training at that time is speed. Mm-hmm. Then we'll move back into the summer program, which is where we are right now. That's about 7 weeks. It's intensive strength and conditioning, but it's different than the winter program in that the essential goal of the summer program is to prepare us to play football in the fall.
Sure.
So we're trying to maximize what we've put together through the first 6 months. We're trying to get into game condition, so you're going to see a lot more conditioning-specific work out here with Coach Doyle. We're still going to be strength training just as we did through spring ball. And then we'll move into training camp here in August, where we're talking about 25 or so focused practices on building a base, kind of similar to the 15 practices we have in the spring. And then we'll move into the in-season phase where I think that's what people are more familiar with. Every week we have a new opponent. We're preparing for them. We're playing against them. We're making corrections, taking a look at what went right, what went wrong, and then we're doing it all over again for about 12 weeks.
How would you, the football staff here at Iowa, how would you describe how your approach to preparation might be different from another team? Are there certain components of how you're approaching it that might be different from another Big Ten opponent? I mean, talk me through, how it might be different.
Sure. Well, I mentioned at the beginning that everything starts with that winter program and strength and conditioning. And I think where we are different than perhaps a lot of people we play, from a philosophical standpoint, everything here is built on our weight room. And the reason for that is very simple. We feel like we're a developmental football program, and we take a lot of pride in that. All I mean by that is, if you look at us in February, we're not going to finish in the top 10 in recruiting rankings. And we're not trying to. That's not who we are. Mm-hmm. But we know that if we do things right, if we take the developmental approach to how we're doing things, then we have a chance in January to finish in the top 10 football rankings, which we've decided is markedly more important than recruiting.
Yeah.
So, basically everything in our culture starts with the weight room, starts with developing strength levels, developing speed, increasing athletic ability, getting bigger, getting stronger, taking guys that, didn't maybe have all the physical measurables coming out of high school, but had the intangible measurables, and then putting them in the right culture, developing them a little bit, and making sure year 4, year 5, they're pretty darn good football players.
Yeah, and some of this starts at recruiting because you want the right kind of guys in here that buy into that developmental approach. But how do you, as a coach of the players and the manager of the players, how do you constantly remind them of the importance of development? I mean, because everybody likes to put when the lights turn on and that you're playing on ESPN and you got all the glory and you end up in the paper the next morning. That's the fun stuff. But,
no question.
I mean, how are you if that's such an important part of the Iowa football program? How are you constantly coaching the kids up on that?
That's a constant battle. It's a constant battle, and it's 12 months a year, it's 365 days a year, and we just think about it as an education. And unfortunately, or fortunately, it depends on how you want to look at it. I think a lot of things in our society today, the way kids are socialized coming into our program, they work against what we're trying to build and what we're trying to do. And we see that as an opportunity because we really feel, though, as though if you look at the national landscape, we're going to do things a certain way. We're going to insist on our culture remaining constant, regardless of what's going on outside of our building. And we feel like that can become a real advantage for us as we compete on a week-to-week basis with the people in our conference. But what's important is explaining the how and the why. And we try to educate our people from day one. And we talk about things all the time. We had a good conversation a couple of years ago. And we use business books and we use business lessons because really we're doing the same thing. And we talked about what is our most valuable resource as a University of Iowa football program. And there was a little bit of discussion, but it was pretty simple. We came to a consensus: it's people. Our resources are people. And so we want to make sure that we're educating our guys and spending time developing our people. We do that in the weight room. Everybody sees that. They see guys that come in, they weigh 220 pounds, they leave, they're 260 pounds and they're faster and they jump higher and they play better football and all that stuff. But I think just as big a component is what we're doing outside of the weight room, just in the classroom from an education standpoint. There's not a day that goes by in our building that we're not going to spend time talking about our culture, what we believe in, who we are, why we are the way we are, and why it is important to do things a certain way on a daily basis.
Yeah. And I know you guys, Coach Doyle, the strength conditioning coach, you mentioned the business books, and each summer even the players are reading some of these books. Talk a little bit about what's sort of the theme of this summer. Is there anything that you guys are reading outside of
Well, you'll appreciate the theme of this summer. We're actually going back to the start, and the theme this year is Break the Rock. And we brought that back. That was obviously something that was really important in 1999. These guys didn't know anything about that, so we felt like that was time to bring that back. And we are not necessarily reading any specific books this summer. We've tried to go back. We had a couple books in the spring. One of the books was called Pound the Stone.
Describe the Break the Rock story, if you could.
So Break the Rock is it's very simple. It's a stonemason, comes to work every day and hits a rock with a hammer. And he strikes it every day, and really there's no change. And interestingly enough, the book we read was called Pound the Stone.
There's no visible change to the rock, even though he
keeps
pound on this thing. Yeah,
hits the hell out of the rock every day, over and over again. And one day, the rock breaks. And it's not necessarily the single strike that broke the rock, but it's the culmination of years and days and months of blows that culminated in this rock cracking open and breaking. But it's just a fable about daily preparation and how it leads to results. And it's simple for kids to grab onto. It was simple in 1999, and we found it still applies in 2018.
Yeah, that's great. Talk a bit about, just to kind of get a little bit more granular, the preparation. I mean, in business, we're always there's big proposals, there's the pitches, there's the big, there's still those big moments, like the game day in a business. Sure. That you're leading up to it and you're trying to win a bid on a big project, whatever that might be. Tell me, just for you personally, walk me through what the night before. I remember when I was a player, you're always anxious, you're always nervous. What, as a coach and a coordinator, manager of the team, and even other staff, walk me through, what does a 24 hours before the game look like for you? What are some of those things before you're going on the field? That big moment. What are you doing, kind of last minute preparation?
Sure. Interestingly enough, the last 24 hours as a coach are markedly different than the last 24 hours as a player.
Yeah, you're resting, you're getting off your feet.
And you've played the game during the week as a coach. We're talking about preparation, and really that's our job. And our job is to prepare the football team and make sure that the players who are going to go out on Saturdays and play, they're ready to play. We live in a world where coaches have taken on kind of a new significance, which is interesting to me. There's a lot of coaches that get a lot of face time. They seem to enjoy it. the best coaches I've been around, the guys I've learned from, their whole motto was coaches coach, players play, and players win games, coaches lose games, essentially. So it's interesting to me that the focus has come off the players, because on game days, I'm yet to see a coach score a touchdown, break a tackle, make a kick,
that was the
miss a kick.
famous Marty Schottenheimer quote he'd always tell us. It's not the alignment, it's the alignees.
It's no question. And there's an old adage in coaching that when you think about big situations, when you think about big moments in a game, 4th and 2, offense, defense, doesn't matter, making that field goal at the end of the game, it's about the player, not the play. So when you think about dialing something up in those situations, you better make sure you're thinking about who you're getting the ball to, not necessarily what the play is. Because you can run the best play in the world, but if it's not the right people, it's not going to be good. So, but that all, that's an interesting segue into this point. You asked about the last 24 hours. Well, you spend 6 days preparing for that plan. And you're constantly, you formulate a plan, you formulate some hypotheses, you go out, you test them.
These are all for you as the offensive coordinator.
Situations,
third and
plays. So something
12,
as simple as 1st and 10. Normal down and distance, 1st and 10, or 2nd and 6 or less. That's the number one situation in a football game. Nobody thinks about it that way because it's normal.
Right. Yeah.
But those are going to be the majority of your play calls. Then you're going to have your 3rd downs. You're going to separate those by short yardage. 1 yard.
You're crafting this game plan throughout the week. Those 6.
You're going against what you've seen on tape. You're going to study your opponent. You're going to identify, what you feel are the matchups that you can exploit, if any. Sometimes there's not so many. That's when it gets real interesting. You're trying to figure out what you do well, what they don't do so well, and it's as simple as trying to match those things up.
Yeah.
But as you said, doing it within those situational blocks. So you're formulating that plan all week. You're putting it together. You go out, you practice it every day, and you practice it against what you're going to see it against. And you start to figure out, hey, this is good, this isn't good. You change the plan, you adjust the plan. By the time you get to Friday, the plan is set.
Yeah.
Really, by the time you get to Thursday evening, the plan is more or less set. Friday evening and the morning of, it's real simple for a person like me. I'm just rehearsing. I'm rehearsing in my mind. I'm rehearsing these situations that are going to come up.
Sure.
Probably no different than a public speaking engagement.
You got to do it because, football, it's real time, right?
I'm ready to do it.
Yeah.
And so...
you say rehearsing, they just...
Yeah, I'll put on tape. It's as simple as I'll put on a film and I'll run through it, and I'll make sure that, I'm watching that and I'm playing the game. No different than, probably like a role-playing board game or something like that. Situation, call. Situation, call. Same thing if we play in an evening game, I may watch an early game. And even though it's not
this is us, this is the Hawkeyes. And
but the situations come up very organically. The guy I learned that from was named Tom Moore, who's legendary coach, great football coach. He's called a lot of great plays. Was Peyton Manning's offense coordinator for a long time. Terry Bradshaw's as well. And he used to do that. He'd watch college football games on Saturday and call them. And that's how he prepared for Saturday. He was using it with his plan, knowing what he was going to see. But there's no substitute for the organic situations that come up in the course of a football game. Extremely unpredictable.
Yeah. How about the morning of a game? Of course, it's different if it's night or if it's a noon tip off. Do you have any sort of rituals or anything, superstitions or anything you're doing the morning of a game? You're eating Wheaties instead of Cheerios, or what's the last minute sort of preparation? Those are always kind of, nervous moments.
I like to get up early. I like to go out and get some fresh air. Used to run a little bit. It's more walking now. But as I do that, I like to go through things once more in my head. Not necessarily with those situations in real time, but just checklisting what I've prepared to do that day.
Yeah.
So, for example, I don't have a photographic memory. I have to work really hard at remembering things. But I always tell people, it's interesting to me. You see a lot of guys that are out there on the field, and they have these big Denny's menus, and they're trying to read off of them and call the game. To me, you should be able to put that thing in your pocket because by Saturday, I want to have that ready list memorized.
Right.
And really, it's not as hard as it sounds because we're doing the same things all the time. But you want to make sure as I go through that walk and I'm inventorying things in my head and making sure that I have all our situations covered, all our personnel groups. If A happens, we do B. You talk about personnel. That's obviously a big thing on Saturdays. What's our plan when Johnny gets hurt? What's our plan when Jimmy gets hurt? What's our plan if Johnny on their team gets hurt? And you have to go through those things. I learned that lesson the real hard way. Players are going to get injured. Injuries are going to happen. Bad things are going to happen within the course of a game. If you don't have those contingencies ready to go, and if you haven't made those decisions and thought about those things before the moment happens, you're going to be left with indecision, which is going to lead to losing about 95% of the time.
Absolutely. So you're going through all those different scenarios.
Always.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then the thing about football and, all sports, but, you play on Saturday, you're going to play the next Saturday, and the preparation almost starts immediately for the next week after the big game's done on that day. Take me inside the coach's meeting room the Sunday after a big game, and walk me through what's the coach? Your coach Kirk Ferentz gets up and he addresses the team, and what's the agenda of that meeting look like the Sunday morning after a game?
Sure.
What goes on there?
Well, Sunday morning is still about what happened Saturday, and really we have to close that loop from the week before. Right? So we have to close that whole loop of the preparation, the plan, the execution. And now we better take some lessons out of it, whether they're good or bad.
Is there an agenda to that meeting? Does that start
Absolutely.
with that?
So it starts with special teams, and we're going to go through with the special teams group what went right, what went wrong. Once we come out of that, now the head coach is going to stand up there, and he's essentially going to talk about what we thought going into the game. When we sat down Friday night in that last meeting, and we said these are the 3 keys to winning this football game. We're going to look at it objectively on Sunday.
Did we do this?
Did we accomplish
Yeah.
A, B, and C? And if we did it lead to winning? Did it lead to the things we wanted? Because sometimes we're wrong as coaches.
Those 3 things weren't necessarily
It happens often,
Yeah.
unfortunately. There's only one coach I've ever been around that was right every week, and his name is Bill Belichick, and he's still right every week. It's amazing. But we're just trying to be objective and be as honest and as transparent as we can, whether it's player to coach or coach to player. Hey, what did we do well this week? What did we do not so well? What can we learn coming out of this experience? What can we improve upon? And we're going to go out and maybe walk through some of those things. Guys will run a little bit, and then the coaching staff is immediately going to get started on the next Saturday.
You're flushing it by the end of the day, Sunday. It's done.
It's gone.
Okay.
Yeah, it's gone. That's the hardest part of coaching. It's great when you lose because it's very easy to move on. It's very difficult when you win a big game or you really feel like you accomplished something because you have to let it go right away.
Yeah.
You can't let one game beat you twice. That's an old adage. I've seen more teams lose the next week because they came off a big game. And we went through that last year. I think you look at our Ohio State game, we caught them coming off a big win, and they certainly weren't ready to play when they came in here. They paid the price for that. We were.
Yeah.
And then you had basically the inverse of that the next week. We were
Absolutely.
coming off a big win, and we went up to Madison, and they were ready for us, and we were not ready to play.
Yeah, that's a great point. You're relatively early on in your coaching career, and you have to love practicing and preparing. And I mean, you guys are here in this building a lot. I mean, a lot more than I think a lot of people appreciate and know. Either in the off season or during the week. You just ran through it, watching tape, getting prepared for the next game plan. I mean, what is it what the actual process of preparing? You have to love to be in your position. What do you love the most about that? What is it about the constant pursuit of improvement that you enjoy the most?
I think I enjoy building things, and I'm not going to go out obviously and build a house. I lack those skills, but the process of building a football team or building an offense or watching a play go from you got a bunch of guys that came in here who don't know anything, to now we've shown you what we're looking for. Now we've gone out, we've executed. It was poor, but we've just continued to hone this thing down. And all of a sudden, we've made 11 guys kind of work in concert, and it looks right, and it's right, and it works. No matter what we see, it has an answer. That process, I just really enjoy. And then the other part of football that I think is a lot of fun is, no matter how well you play, whether you're an individual player or a football team, no matter how far you've advanced and how good you've become, you can always be better. And I think that's true of life. But one nice thing about football is we come out here every day and there's cameras on everybody. There's nowhere to hide. And so when you coach players, just the ability to be part of that continual improvement process and have a small part in seeing a guy achieve some of his goals, that's a lot of fun.
Yeah.
That's just a lot of fun. Whether it's one individual player, there's a lot of reward in that. But certainly when you're in a locker room with a football team that's accomplished something, that's extremely rewarding.
Yeah, absolutely. And you said, you're constantly coaching, helping other people improve. How about you personally? I mean, being at this stage of your coaching a career, what are a couple areas that you've identified where you think you can gain the most improvement on?
I think the scariest thing in coaching is we live in a profession full of very insecure and there's not a lot of self-esteem in our profession. So what that turns into, you're probably around some of these guys, I'm thinking of one in particular, you get a lot of experts and they know more than everyone else. And the reality about football, and it's probably like almost anything in life, the expanse of football and its variations and the way it is played and the philosophies and the belief systems that make up our game, they're so expansive that they're unknowable. You could not know everything there is to know about our game. And I think that's a lot of fun because it gives you a chance to learn and grow and go study things that maybe you don't understand. Now, when it comes to our scheme and what we do, we're going to coach what we know. We're going to always try to grow and learn and expand. But when it comes time to implement something that we're going to do, we're going to stick to what we know,
right?
Because we know it. And I know I can coach this. Hey, I may understand that, but I don't know how to coach that.
Yeah.
So I think one thing you bring up, what are you trying to do? You're always just trying to learn. You're trying to go out, you're trying to meet other people. And what I think is interesting in coaching is going and finding somebody that's very different from me.
Right. Yeah.
Finding somebody, whether it's philosophically.
Can you pull a nugget from them?
They're very different from me. They believe in different things. Or maybe personality-wise, they're very different from me. I like being around people like that. Life is no fun if you're just around people like you all the time. So I think, there's a lot of things I can work on, but one of the biggest things that to me I'm always trying to look at and trying to evaluate is, how am I as a teacher? Am I a good teacher? And I don't just mean football. Can I teach skills? The smartest people in the world, the best teachers in the world make very difficult concepts and complex things extremely simple and easy to understand. And I think that's what we're always trying to do. So a big part of what I like to do when I go out and travel and visit places is sit in meetings, listen to people teach, listen to people explain concepts, and try to glean from their
How are they making this very
methods.
Complex thing seem very simple?
Or sometimes they're not.
Right.
Because I've sat I've sat in clinics or things like that where, listen, this is what I do for a living.
And you can't understand. How can
I'm a
18-year-old
relative
kid?
expert. I'm not that smart. But if I don't understand what you're talking about, we got a real problem here.
Yeah, no 18-year-old kids.
Exactly.
Great. So we like to end all of our interviews with just some kind of rapid-fire questions. What profession other than football coach, if you had the chance, would you most like to attempt?
Yeah, if I'd had the courage, I would have liked to join the military. I find that to be fascinating, and I just have the utmost respect for what those people do. But when you talk about leaders and decision makers and people who have to make hard decisions on a daily basis in very tough environments, I think that's as challenging as it gets.
Yeah, absolutely. Somebody outside of football, has there been a business leader or leader of an organization or someone that you've followed or looked up to or pulled some? You mentioned you kind of pride yourself on constant learning. Has there been someone out there that you've followed? I
think that there's a lot of football coaches, but you're going to hold me to outside of football. Herb Kelleher is a guy that I find very fascinating. To start basically a small startup business in an extremely monopolistic and money-dominated arena, and have as much success as they've had over 45 years. I mean, I think that's remarkable. And there's a lot of parallels to what we do as far as we're competing against bigger entities that have more resources.
Right.
But he's made quite a living off of just doing things right. Not to mention he took a left turn. He was doing one thing and had no experience, just decided to go in a different direction. I always find that fascinating.
Yeah, great. How about news? I mean, non-football or sports news. How are you plugging into kind of I know it's hard for you guys here. You can go down the rabbit hole and not look up. Are there ways you guys are?
Sure.
What's your preferred way of staying in tune with the world?
It's interesting because I've not come along to the e-reader and iPad craze when it comes to books. I still like holding a book. But one thing I found about my iPad and the Apple News app is it's just a tremendous way for a person like me who doesn't always have the time to sit down and get educated on current events, to have the ability to kind of pick and choose where my news feeds are coming from.
You're not just hitting it from
it's tremendous.
MSNBC or Fox. You kind of get you all the different.
Yeah, there's still a couple. There's way too many Fox News stories that show up on my feed. I got to fix that.
How about a TV show or a podcast or something? If you do have a little free time at home, what do you?
Yeah, I'll tell you what, I like listening to How I Built This. which is an NPR podcast. I think that's really interesting. A lot of startups and small businesses. And then TV, I got to be honest with you, I don't spend much time on the news channels. So if I'm watching television, it's usually strictly entertainment.
Okay. What's some entertainment?
My favorite TV show of all time is The Office. I love that show.
Good. How about a motivational quote? If you were to hang one thing in your office, and I mean, obviously football and sports are chock full of these sort of things, but if you could pick just one, a favorite one, what is it?
Well, I'll tell you, I have it hanging in my office. Never complain, never explain. And that was, I had attributed it to Henry Ford, which is incorrect. It's actually attributed to, who was the British Prime Minister?
Churchill?
No, before Churchill.
Oh, man, you're tucking me. I'm even a history major here. I should know that.
He's famous. I'm a history major
Chamberlain?
too, but
Neville Chamberlain?
No. We're going way back.
Okay.
Doesn't matter.
Okay.
Everybody can look it up.
I like it though.
But for 20 years, I thought it was Henry Ford. So I've been
you may have repurposed
enlightened.
Okay, good. If you were lucky enough to have 30 extra minutes in a day, what would you do with it?
Yeah, I think I would try to spend it with my family.
Yeah.
In this business, you just unfortunately never get to spend enough time at home.
Mm-hmm.
And if I had 30 extra minutes, I would probably try to do that. My wife would probably tell you I would spend it over here. So
yeah.
I'd like to think I would stay at home.
Yeah. And we've talked a little bit about it, but is there one book that you've read, maybe just say recently in the last couple of years, it's been really influential to
I tell you, I read this book in the last 12 months, and I don't know if it's strictly a business book, but it's a book called Certain to Win, and it's a very fascinating book about essentially the theory of maneuver warfare, but very applicable to business, to football, to any of these things. I found that book really fascinating. It's more of a textbook, but if you can make it through it, it's pretty interesting.
And then if you just had to in one sentence, how would you define success?
I would steal it from, so another book I read that's excellent, but I don't know, it just came out. Christoa put it on my desk, the Ray Dalio book, Principles. Mm-hmm. And he, within it, determines success, and I think it's very similar to probably Chamberlain's definition of success. But success is the ability to struggle well. And I think that's about as well as you can define it. That's what we're trying to teach our young guys. Mm-hmm. I hope that's what I'm trying to teach my kids. But
it's never easy. You got to embrace it, right?
You're going to fail a lot.
Yeah,
that's okay. Keep coming back.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, great. Thank you so much for taking the time. Good luck this year.
Thank you.
Awesome.